So those of you who walked along fast enough have the treat of being able to see the weed screen in operation. Essentially, you can see the front of the grill there and how tight the knit between the bar is. That's non-standard, that's not what we want. Because this is such a low flow waterway, you're going to get a lot more detritus coming in your pump station, and any small pebbles, stones, bits getting in there is going to cause you a problem because it's a pump driven system. So you've got a really tight mesh on your weed screen, and then you've got the automated cleaners, which during an event will go along, lift and grab and take stuff out there. So we did have a demo, but he stopped now. But you can generally see the change in the pump station asset. Everything that's this whole frontage here is an addition to the pump station. So there's existing parts, and you see the corner here, that's the new operations area. Almost all of the internals of the pumping station were gutted and changed out. So new panels, new boards, new motors, new pumps, pretty much the whole shebang. The area here was where we had the where the contractor had the temporary pumps. They brought the water over the structure and then discharged that into the ooze. But again, as we said, the pump capacity now is far increased to what was originally provided. Now, it wasn't driven by a traditional flood risk management scheme. Usually with these sort of assets, you'd look and go, what's the cost benefit, what's the best way we can deliver this? Given that the pump station failed, it was delivered under emergency works. All of the temporary platforms and things were put up without planning permission, and then retrospective planning permission was worked through with York Council. Not the way things are best done, but given the risks and the issues around the area and how sensitive it was done for the wider benefit of the town. And then the new asset was developed in partnership with the local planning authority to ensure it got through. Now you can see the boarding at the top. Originally what was requested was essentially a high rust finish. So essentially it's an industrial finish that allows rust to just peel off. Now given that we've got a river here and that rust would drop in the river, it was deemed not suitable, which is fully correct. You'd end up with rust falling and you just end up with pollution. So it's a rust imitation cladding. So it looks like the rust that you would normally get in an industrial building or something off Grand Designs, but it's not going to drop detritus and rubbish into our river and cause us problems.
Who wanted this finish?
It was actually by York's Conservation Society and York's Conservation and Heritage Officer. Essentially, when you're working in an area like York with a lot of designated assets, a lot of listed buildings, the logical thing is to try and mimic them and hide them. So that could be a fake castle. But actually, one of the things that is requested as part of the consultation period is actually that each structure owns its place and what its function is. So that's an industrial asset. They wanted that to look a beautiful industrial building. So that's why they requested the rust finish. But we couldn't deliver that because of the pollution issues. Which is something interesting to be aware of. If you're going back to another site or another location, if you start going down this route without consultation, you can end up just designing something that's never going to be permitted. So go and have that early consultation, get involved with stakeholders and get their buy-in to whatever you're going to design rather than what you've already designed. Telling them something's great once you've designed it is not as good as asking them what's great and then showing them how great an alternative option is. I think it's the diplomatic way of saying tell them what they should want instead. So we'll walk along, you can see, before we walk along anywhere, you can just see the Foss barrier there. That's part of there's a new project coming forward that will look to increase the height of that barrier, allowing additional protection and flood mitigation from the ooze backing up into the foss. And it's that floodgate that means the pump station's required. Let's walk along.
So there's a raised gate has to be tied into raised defences.
So
elsewhere.
yeah, essentially the defences, all the defences are as weak as the weakest point.
Yeah.
So when that gate drops, it ties in with all of the other critical defence heights. So each of these defences have got some allowance for freeboard and overtopping and sort of wave action and things. This largely won't, because it's in such a low pressure area. It's on the water getting in from the ooze is just backing up. It's not under flow conditions, so it won't have sort of allowances for wave action and such.
Yep.
So that height of that top barrier is the critical height around the rest of the scheme, but don't expect that protection and that height everywhere. There's a lot of locations throughout York where when we've just walked through one, essentially just north of Skelmanthorpe, all of the properties have property level protection and their own individual gates, because developing a scheme to protect that would essentially just make the whole of that York frontage a big concrete wall, which, given its conservation area, you just can't do. So, you got any more questions?
What was the cost for a new pumping station?
I don't really know. That's the biggest thing. So because it was done under emergency works principles, essentially the cost was, the remit was get the best pumping station possible built as quick as possible. So in doing that, there's a lot of costs which just disappear into the ether. So if people sit down and go through all the bills, it will be more expensive than a traditional scheme in terms of design and construction. However, there is a sneaking suspicion amongst a lot of people involved that the approach of we're going to do something, so we're just going to spend the money designing it and doing the best we can, rather than messing around with economics and business cases and draft 1 proposals, draft 2 proposals, all these iterations. There's a suspicion that actually it's not hugely different to develop such a similar asset in this location than a normal project, but it being such emergency works, everyone was just chucked on. You're trying to fix problems within an existing asset, you're trying to route cabling through conduits and things that were never designed for that cabling. You're dropping pumps into pump wells and civils infrastructure that was never designed for them. It's all a little bit finding what fits, and you'll find a problem and you'll fix it on site or fix it as part of a design. So it's quite difficult to put a figure on. I'm sure with York, the information that the agency have published on Foss Barrier gives an indicative figure, but it was delivered in such an unconventional way that that figure's a little bit high in the sky.
So was there an upgrade plan for the barrier in existence?
There wasn't a project developed at that stage.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a we're going to do something with the barrier in the next 6 years. So you have essentially the next 6 years are planned as part of what's called an MTP, so a medium-term plan. That tells you what you're going to do in the next 6 years. So as a sales guy for the water team, I look at that and go, who's going to be spending money where in the next 6 years, and I go and talk to them. If the project's not in there, it doesn't mean that it's not going to get brought in, or it can't have some funding allocated to it. Foss Barrier wasn't in that 6-year MTP programme at the time, but it was identified that actually, as far as asset performance team looks at that and they say, well, yeah, it's reached the end of its design life, it's starting to have some issues, it needs some new impellers, etc. We need to look at it, but it wasn't it's falling apart, we need to fix it now. It was purely driven by such an extreme event, just happened to coincide with the timing of that asset and when that needed to be replaced.
I'm thinking like in terms of the Thames barrier, they know that's going to need replacing.
Yeah, so it's not got...
was there an idea like that at some point this isn't going to
so
do the job?
Yeah, so within the risk management organisations, there's a couple of different structures. You've got your capital programme, which is we're going to build something new, we're going to build something shiny. We've got a project. There's also asset performance. Now, in terms of spend, Capital spend is your Christmas money, your birthday money, the stuff you get that's big to do something nice. The revenue is the stuff you get paid for. So that's your monthly spend, you're just overhead turnovers. So as the Environment Agency, they have so much money coming in just to maintain their assets. Go and check defences, go and mow banks, make sure that the pump stations are operating. So asset performance have their own sort of ring-fenced pot, if you will. Now that, as with all organisations, that ring-fenced pot's never big enough. So they understand when their design life for some of the assets are. They'll go out and do inspections and go, it's deteriorating at the right rate, it's deteriorating a little bit quicker, it's deteriorating a little bit slower. So in terms of FOSS, the structure, everything was okay. It wasn't due to fall down. A design life is a constructor's plan of when it'll finish. It's not actually the end of when that asset needs to be knocked down and rebuilt. Take the castle behind you for an example, that wouldn't have had a design life, but it's still going, it's still functioning. So this asset has the same thing. You might need to go in and do remedials, you might go in do some new sheet piling, might need to go in and replace pumping pillars, etc, etc, but it doesn't need a whole-scale refurbishment. Now within the Environment Agency and a part of the DEFRA Research and Development Fund, there's been a lot of investigation into design lives and deterioration curves of assets, and as part of Xavi's project, Humber Strategy, or Humber 2100 now, plus now, plus is everything. What they're looking at is taking a strategic overview of all of the assets throughout the Humber. I think it's something like 300 plus kilometres of defence frontage. And they're looking at all the condition grades of the assets at present, looking at their construction type, and then giving them a rating and saying, right, this asset is brand new, it's perfect, it's got an asset condition grade of 1. Now we know that under normal conditions, normal flooding, tidal action, scour, that asset will gradually deteriorate, and after 30-40 years it'll need something doing to it. What you might do is you might go in and resurface it, you might go in and top the level up, you might go in and do some small maintenance, and you might just bring it up to a condition grade of 4 from a condition grade of 2 from a condition grade of 4. And you might decide to do that 2 or 3 times, spend a little bit of money and just get the asset functioning. But then after so many years you're going to have to go in and do the whole thing again. So FOSS wasn't in the we need to go and strip the whole thing, do it all again, but it was in this we need to do something fairly significant in the short to medium term, but we've not got the budget and everything allocated, we just know we need to do it and we'll monitor it. Now it's a bit of a suck it and see relationship, and quite a few places have to take that, because if you're thinking about the Humber, some of them assets, some of them defences will be nearly 200 years old. They'll have been built when they were reclaiming that land. And because they had a lot of people, a lot of time, a lot of resources, and people were very cheap back then, they could build these assets to really, really good conditions. Not saying that we can't, but because they had all of that availability, they could just go and get people to dig good quality clay out over in Cleckheaton, Leeds, up in the hills, and then afford to ship it down to Humber and Hull without condition, because they didn't care about fish, they didn't care about anything. They just wanted mud putting in the right place and preventing the land from flooding. So that's what they did. We don't have that luxury anymore. We've got to consider all the impact, the carbon impacts of us going and putting these assets in place. We can't be shipping everything in, we can't be putting barges and conveyor belts to bring clay in across triple SIs and designated Ramsar sites. So the Humber Estuary is really important for overwintering birds, etc. But we can't, there's just things we can't do, we've got our hands tied. We just have to be a bit sensible about that. So I've sort of gone off a little bit off piste, but just to give you an understanding of asset performance and degradation and how and why we do what we do. The work that Xavi's doing will hopefully better inform the schemes that are taken forward in the Humber. So you might decide that actually, yes, this scheme's in the next 6-year plan, but we might spend a bit of money now, bring it up, and then it's going to all degrade this 50 kilometres of coast at the same time. and then we can go in and do one big scheme. Just spending a lot of money at once using the same people is usually a lot more cost effective than going and having a lot of these smaller projects, because you get economies of scale. Buying up the whole quarry's worth of stone is usually far cheaper than buying a specific set of blocks. So, give you a bit of an indication. I'll have a quick wander up, and then we'll take a time check just to make sure I'm not going to be keeping you too long.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
And then we can run along New Walk.
No, you said the door pumps were about 5 cubics,
Yeah, total 5 cubics across the basin.
and they're now at 24. Is it? You said.
24, something like that, yeah.
Is that enough to deal with peak flows, or is
It would
that?
have been enough to deal with the 2015 event,
Yeah.
but it's the it does enough volume
Yeah.
to manage a lot of the flooding that would be caused. However, if we were to go down a traditional joint probability assessment,
Right.
we would have come pretty much to the same conclusion of we can't do this,
Yeah.
because the likelihood of this getting high and the U's getting high is so low. Actually, we don't need to do it, but it happened. So
What do you think the design life on the 24 cubics is? What should that cope with?
the don't know,
I don't know.
not been part of that stuff.
There's a lot of water, but I'd imagine there's a hell of a lot of water coming down
There's
that size of catchment.
Yeah, there's a hell of a lot of water. Essentially, this just the whole of the York just acts like a big pond.
Yeah.
Rather than it's weird. You think about flow, but York, this is all so flat that they've not got a good decent speed
Yeah.
to ship it, but it's all just sits in, floods through.
Does that mean that it just fills with silt pretty quickly?
It does fill with silt pretty quickly, which is why they've got all of this open. The thing is that you can jumping to I think what's going to be your next question about keeping the waterway clear.
If we keep it dredged first before.
Yeah,
It does look a bit stagnant.
it is pretty grim.
You see the methane bubbles coming up.
Yeah, it's essentially, as with most sediment in channels, it reaches a natural state. You'll get a big event that does flush things through.
Yeah.
Maintaining a design level in a channel via dredging is suitable. However, the approach of, if you want to dredge all this, you can go and dredge it, brilliant, cracking. But it's going to go back uphill down the end. So rather than thinking about dredging as getting a bigger bucket, dredging should be done where you can manage a fast, slow flow regime in your river. So this is an important section of river. We want flooding to get away quick, so this needs to be a fast section, which means it needs to have speed upstream and speed downstream, because as you see speed up flow over a weir, the gap between and the level raise on the actual weir itself is very small for the amount of flow. Whereas on the upstream and the downstream, because you've got that volume coming in, the water levels rise rapidly because you've got very little movement.
Yeah.
So if you can pass as much flow through here as possible, the hydraulics mean that you're not going to get as much level raise in the channel, but the bed level largely doesn't influence that much. That's more the structures in and around York and the narrowing of the channel rather than the actual bed.
Okay, so it doesn't affect the volume too much.
Not so much through York. We have looked at the dredging. You could go and dredge all of York, but essentially, I think here, something like 20-ish metres AOD.
Yeah.
We're not high. We've not got that. It's not that much high until you're at Hull.
Yeah.
Well, it is Hull, but the
It's
Hull,
not very high.
Hull's under sea level. Really weird place to build a town. Well, who am I to do town planning?